For the first time in a while, the Bundesliga is not the Bayern Liga. Actually, it's a very close title race, and today we're gonna dive into that. Before we go into the season though, here's an overview into the transfer windows of every single potential contender. After winning the Bundesliga last season, Bayern Munich has now won the title 10 straight times. In total, they've won the league 32 times. Manager Julian Nagelsmann in his second season hopes to lead his men to another title this season. However, Bayern were dealt a huge loss in the transfer window as Robert Lewandowski left to Barcelona. The Polish striker was world class for the German club, scoring 344 times in 375 games. So needless to say, there is definitely a hole up top now. In search of a new clinical goal scorer, Bayern looked into Liverpool's Sadio Mane. The winger last season scored 23 times in all competitions. The Bavarians also strengthened other areas with the signings of right-back Nusser Mazraoui, midfielder Ryan Gravenberch, young gun Mathys Tel, and centre-back Matthijs de Ligt. To be a fan of Borussia Dortmund is psychological torture, and last season was no different. They finished second somehow, but still sacked manager Marco Rose after just one season. Because despite having some incredible talent in the likes of Erling Haaland and Jude Bellingham, Dortmund's defense was more incapable of doing their job than the Vietnamese Football Federation. Speaking of Haaland though, the inevitable finally happened and he was shipped off to Man City to terrorize the Premier League. Man City also took centre-back Manuel Akanji. After bringing in technical director Edin Terzic as new manager, Dortmund brought in a lot of players for a total of 104.6 million, including one of Europe's best strikers last season, Sebastian Haller. Unfortunately, he was diagnosed with testicular cancer and would be out indefinitely. The black and yellow added more attacking options in the speedy Karim Adeyemi and veteran Anthony Modeste. Then Dortmund revamped the defense with Niklas Süle, Salih Özcan, and Nico Schlotterbeck, who was the Bundesliga's best defender last season. Every position that needed to be improved upon was, and Jude Bellingham would probably be playing his very last season. And don't forget, Bayern had just lost their current active all-time top scorer. So if there was any time for Dortmund to capitalize, it would be this season. But don't get your hopes up, because this team flounders when the tiniest bit of pressure is put upon them. The cycle of being a fan of evil pharmaceutical company Leverkusen has been nothing but false hope and pain since 2002. Oh look, a generational talent.
And it's gone!
The Werk South though didn't lose anyone of note in this window, but they did add some attacking talent, like Czech phenom Adek Hlošek and Callum Hudson-Odoi. Leverkusen are at that part of the cycle where the team has managed a third place finish. They will inevitably fall back down to below top 7 by the end of this season, especially with their new generational talent in Florian Wirtz being out until pretty much the end of the year. Leipzig finished 4th last season and also won the DFB Pokal. This would be manager Domenico Tedesco's first full season in charge, and under his tenure, Leipzig had the best defense in the league. They add to it with the acquisitions of left-back David Raum and centre-back Abdou Diallo. Leipzig unfortunately lose Nordi Mukiele to PSG though. The club also brought in Xaver Schlager to support the midfield. And on top of all this, Leipzig saw the return of Timo Werner in hopes they could see the same clinical speedster from a few years ago. Union Berlin surprised everyone by finishing 5th last season, but unfortunately right off the bat, they lose their top scorer in Taiwo Awoniyi. To replace him, Die Eisernen bring in striker Jordan Pifak. The American, ignored by his nation's federation and coach, scored 22 times in the Swiss league. Freiburg are another exciting story in the world of German football. Last season, they were in a prime position for the Champions League with just 2 matches remaining. However, they bottled both of those matches and fell down to 6th. Then there was the DFB Pokal where they were 1-0 up, only to concede late on and then lose on penalties. I'm not done, Freiburg fans. Your pain doesn't end just yet. You then lose the league's best defender in Nico Schlotterbeck to Dortmund. But hey, at least now you have Matthias Ginter. The club also made attacking signings in Ritsu Duan and Daniel Kofi Kere. Mönchengladbach are very topsy-turvy. One season, they'll perform out of their minds and finish in the highs of like top 2, top 3, and then other seasons, they'll look like the Laotian national team. This could be a year to be optimistic about though, with the addition of solid defender Ko Itakura from Man City. Mönchengladbach also sacked Adi Hutter and brought in former Norwich coach Daniel Farke. Frankfurt may have won the Europa League, but we can't forget about their 10th place finish in the league. They hope to bolster their attack with the signings of Lucas Alario and Jens Peter Hausch. There were a few additions in defense too, in defensive midfielder Christian Jakic and centre-back Hrvoje Smolcic. The best signing in bargain though was Randall Kolo Muani from Nantes. The young free transfer scored 12 times in Ligue 1 last season. It's not a Bundesliga season without Bayern Munich smashing a team on the very first match day. This time the victims were Europa League winners Frankfurt, who were demolished 6-1 at home. Freiburg also started well with a 4-0 win against Augsburg, as did Union Berlin against their rivals Hertha Berlin, with new signing Jordan Pefok having a dream debut. Mönchengladbach and Dortmund also started well with wins of their own, while Leipzig already show early signs of struggle after drawing with relegation candidate Stuttgart. Matchday 2, and just two teams have won all their games so far. Bayern cleaned up shop against Wolfsburg, Freiburg were 1-0 up against BVB, but then the keeper turned off his brain and the entire defense followed suit. Most of the other contenders drew in their matches, including Leipzig, who continue their underwhelming form. In even worse form though is Leverkusen, who fall all the way to the very bottom after a loss to Augsburg. After 77 minutes played, Dortmund had a 2-goal advantage, and then in classic Dortmund fashion, they collapsed and conceded 3 goals in the last 6 minutes, with 2 of them coming in stoppage time. Now over the years, we have seen the incredible ways that yellow Spurs will choke, but this loss was such a cataclysmic flounder that it actually made history. Werder Bremen became the first ever team down 2-0 after the 89th minute to come back and win. With that criminal loss, Dortmund dropped down to 7th, but really, they should be dropping down to the damn 20th tier. With wins though, Mönchengladbach, Union Berlin, Mainz, Freiburg, and Hoffenheim all jump ahead, while Leipzig and Leverkusen live up to their first letters and continue to go in the wrong direction. On to matchday 4, and finally Bayern drop points after Jan Sommer makes 19 saves. Union Berlin remain unbeaten in the league after they picked Schalke apart 6-1. Freiburg climb into 3rd after a slim victory versus last place Bochum. Hoffenheim, after 4 games, are looking like a proper surprise after beating Augsburg. And Dortmund, after their historic falter, recover with a win against Hertha. Then finally Frankfurt, Leverkusen, and Leipzig all earn their first victories of the campaign. A week later, finally Bayern's reign at the top ends after a draw away with Union Berlin. Freiburg defeats Leverkusen in a thrilling 3-2 game, and as a result take the lead in the league. Dortmund then joined them as the joint top league leaders after yet another 1-0 win. Mainz continue their fine start and go from 7th to 5th after an impressive away win against Mönchengladbach. Köln round out the top 6 and stay unbeaten after a 4-2 win against Wolfsburg. Then finally, Leipzig pulled the plug on Tedesco after a humiliating loss to Frankfurt. In his place comes Marco Rose, who really didn't have to wait too long to return to the Bundesliga. Freiburg's time at the top doesn't last long though, as they draw with Mönchengladbach the very next week. Dortmund, as per usual, couldn't capitalize and lost 3-0 against their old coach. But neither could 3rd place Bayern, who conceded a last-minute penalty to 14th place Stuttgart. So it would be 4th place Union Berlin who lunge into 1st after beating Köln. A little bit farther down the table, Christoph Baumgartner and more importantly Hoffenheim are still in great form. They earned their 4th win against Mainz, scoring 4 times and take 4th in the table. Oh, and you want to know where the 3rd favorite team to win the league according to 538 is? They're here. Matchday 7 sees Geraldo Becker and Jordan Pefok continue to cook. Union Berlin also see the gap increase, with 2nd through 4th dropping points. 2nd place Freiburg and 3rd place Hoffenheim draw with each other, while Bayern extend their winless streak to 4 after being stunned by 13th place Augsburg, which drops them to a season-low 5th place. As a result of the shakeup, Dortmund sneak into 2nd after a victory in the Riviera Derby. Then Mönchengladbach re-enter the top 6 frame thanks to their 3-0 win against Leipzig. Not too far from them is Frankfurt and Mainz. On the 8th match day, Union Berlin's unbeaten run finally came to an end at the hands of a Frankfurt side starting to find form. 2nd place Dortmund, who were 2 points below, again failed to overtake the league leaders after losing 3-2 to Köln. 3rd place Freiburg, though, are now level with the league leaders after a win against Mainz. And Bayern finally got their shit back together after the annual beatdown of Bayer Leverkusen as they hop back into 3rd. Leverkusen then says enough is enough and sends their manager to the Shadow Realm. He's then replaced with Spanish footballing legend Xabi Alonso. All the while this is happening, Hoffenheim fall to 5th after their 2nd straight draw. In the following week, Union Berlin bounced back with a win to hold on to 1st. And thanks to a Freiburg draw, the points difference between 1st and 2nd is now back to 2. In this match day, we also got to witness the first Der Klassiker of the season. Leon Goretzka with his signature laser gave the Bavarians the lead before the half. Leroy Sané then doubled it in the 53rd minute. But then something happened. Borussia Dortmund actually clutched up. First, it was Youssoufa Moukoko with a tricky shot in the 74th minute. Then, with the last kick of the game, Anthony Modeste rescues a point for Bay as Signal Iduna Park erupts. The game ends in a 2-2 draw, which means both teams maintain their respective positions in the league. Last place Bochum finally earned their first win after changing managers a couple weeks ago. It comes at the expense of 6th place Frankfurt, who drop out of the top 6, as does Köln after losing to Mönchengladbach. The two clubs trade positions as a result. One team we've barely talked about though is Werder Bremen. After sending Hoffenheim down to 7th, the newly promoted side continue to exceed expectations and now find themselves 5th in the table. That's thanks to league top scorer Niklas Füllkrug, who has 8 goals to his name already. Matchday 10 happens and Union Berlin slaps Dortmund all the way down to 8th after beating them 2-0. The Eisernen then go 4 points clear after 2nd place Freiburg get decimated by 3rd place Bayern Munich. Werder Bremen's time in the top 5 was shorter than the Charlotte Hornets' playoff hopes after they lost to 12th place Mainz. 6th place Mönchengladbach also dropped points, which opened the top 5 door to Frankfurt and Hoffenheim, who both won their fixtures. Oh yeah, and here's a quick update on our third favorites, Leverkusen.
It's not looking good, bruv. It's not looking good.
Matchday 11 brings us shock as last place Bochum defeat the league leaders. 2nd place Bayern Munich then closes the gap to just 1 point after a win against Hoffenheim. Hoffenheim fall to 7th as a result, and Frankfurt take over 4th with a win against Mönchengladbach. 3rd place Freiburg maintain their spot and come closer to 1st after beating Werder Bremen. Dortmund, after a short period in the mid-table void, rejoined the top 5 with a 5-0 destruction of Stuttgart, while Mainz do some scoring of their own, beating Köln by 5 and entering the top 6. Keep an eye on Leipzig also. Their form has been improving and now are within sight of the European spots. Next was matchday 12, and for once the top 3 remain the same as every team comes out victorious. Dortmund then overtake Frankfurt for 4th after defeating them 2-1. Leipzig, since the appointment of Marco Rose, have scored the joint most points in the league and add another 3, defeating Lever Relegation, Leverkusen, and thanks to Mainz and Hoffenheim dropping points, Leipzig find themselves in the top 6 for the first time this season. What the f*** happened? Union Berlin before this match had easily the best defense in the league, but in a matter of 30 minutes, they turned into San Marino. Oh, and why don't you look at that? Leverkusen are finally out of the relegation zone. Congratulations, guys. Congratulations. Balance across the realms returns soon after when Bayern slid up into 1st with a win against Hertha. Freiburg defeat Köln 2-0, meaning they jump over Union Berlin as well into 2nd. The rest of the top 6 remain the same as all teams win. Into matchday 14, and Bayern extend their lead to 4 points after both Freiburg and Union Berlin drop points. Dortmund get their 5th loss of the season after failing to score against Wolfsburg, which drops them to 6th after wins from Frankfurt and Leipzig. Then right before the World Cup break, the gap still remains at 4 points after Bayern's win against Schalke. 2nd place Union Berlin continue to dwindle in form, losing 4-1 to 3rd place Freiburg. As a result, Freiburg climb up to 2nd, and Union Berlin free falls down to 5th. Frankfurt earned just a point against Mainz, but still move up 1 space into 4th. Leipzig's great form doesn't look like it's stopping anytime soon, and another win sends them into 3rd, while Dortmund stay in 6th despite losing to Mönchengladbach. However, Wolfsburg and still Gladbach are lurking ever so closely. Just like the Eredivisie video, here's a brief overview of the January transfers for any of the contenders. After the World Cup, Bayern lost their keeper Manuel Neuer to a skiing injury. They then decided now was the perfect time to buy the man who has haunted their nightmares for years in Jan Sommer. Bayern go 1 step further and bring in fullbacks Daley Blind and João Cancelo. Cancelo is one of the best attacking right backs in the world and was also Man City's best player just a year ago. 2nd place Freiburg didn't bring anyone, however they did lose a promising talent in Kevin Shade to Brentford. 3rd place Leipzig see nothing to really change, so they don't make any transfers at all. 4th place Frankfurt also do pretty much the same, but they do bring in Paxton Aronson. 6th place Dortmund had one position in mind, and that was right back, due to Thomas Meunier's injury. Their replacement was Julian Rierson, a starter at Union Berlin. Union Berlin this season have again exceeded expectations and have been very strong. However, in recent weeks, they were showing signs of faltering mid-season form. This prompted them to add some depth in midfielder Aissa Laidouni. And as Dortmund had just bought their starting right back, Union Berlin break the bank, equal their transfer record, and buy Josip Juranovic. The 27-year-old was huge for Croatia in their run to the World Cup 2022 semifinals. Wolfsburg, who are just within distance of the top 6, make just 1 transfer. They threw $500,000 at Montpellier for left-back Nicolas Kotza. 8th place Mönchengladbach lost their longtime human wall in Jan Sommer. However, they acted quickly and brought in Jonas Omlin. The Bundesliga returned in late January, January and kicked off with a 1-1 draw between Bayern and Leipzig. Afterward, Leipzig fell to 5th, however Bayern somehow lucked out and actually increased the points gap to 5. They can thank Wolfsburg for that after the Xbox-colored team pile-drived second-place Freiburg 6-0. And after winning their matches, Union Berlin and Frankfurt passed Freiburg in the table as a result. Then Dortmund maintained 6th after an incredible 7-goal thriller that had Gio Reyna scoring the winner. Oh, and why don't you look at that? Leverkusen are somehow in the top 10 now. Matchday 17 sees the Bavarians only managing a draw against Köln. Second place Frankfurt failed to capitalize though, as they draw with 4th place Freiburg. Although third place Union Berlin takes advantage of this blunder with a win away in Bremen and shrinks the points gap to just 3. While Dortmund, through yet another Gio Reyna winner, earn all 3 points and overtake Freiburg for 5th. Sebastian Haller also makes his incredible comeback after a miraculous full recovery. And Wolfsburg continue to pose a threat in 7th after a 5-0 drubbing of the blue dumpster fire. Bayern the following week again can only conjure up a draw. With Union Berlin winning yet again, the points difference is now just 1. Leipzig keep hold of 3rd after defeating Stuttgart, and Dortmund hop into 4th after a 3rd straight victory. 6th place Freiburg were briefly in a rut, having started the new year in 2nd, but a win puts them back on track. Into matchday 19, both Bayern and Union Berlin win their games, so nothing changes there. 3rd place Leipzig drop points though, and Dortmund take full advantage, collecting their 4th straight win in a 5-1 beatdown of Freiburg. Frankfurt then earn a convincing win against 17th place Hertha and overtake Freiburg as well. It is crazy how many times Freiburg has been blown out and somehow they're still hanging in top 6. Oh, and remember when Hoffenheim had that very promising start? Well, since their last win in mid-October, they've earned just 2 points, the least of any team. A 5-2 loss to Bochum was what finally broke the camel's back, and Hoffenheim sacked manager Andre Breitenreiter. The club then appointed American Pellegrino Matarazzo. Matchday 20 and the top 3 all win their fixtures, including Union Berlin, who end Leipzig's 12-game unbeaten run. Frankfurt also lose this week, and as a result, Freiburg are back into the top 4 after beating 16th place Stuttgart. For matchday 21, we're gonna approach this more chronologically. Saturday kicked off with 4 big matches. 5th place Leipzig defeated 7th place Wolfsburg 3-0. 4th place Freiburg took care of business against Bochum, and 6th place Frankfurt won against 9th place Werder Bremen 2-0. But the biggest result was 10th place Mönchengladbach, despite having their god literally against them, beating Bayern 3-2. This, as a result, opened up a huge opportunity for both Dortmund and Union Berlin the very next day. A win for Union Berlin meant they would retrieve the top spot once again. Their opponents may look easy, seeing how this is a home match against last place. However, Schalke in their previous 3 games hadn't conceded once. And unfortunately, Union Berlin wouldn't ruin that streak as the teams drew 0-0. Still a good result though, as they were now level on points with Bayern. Dortmund played 2 hours later and did something very un-Dortmund-like. They actually performed when the pressure was on them. BVB mauled 16th place Hertha Berlin 4-1 to create a 3-way tie at the top between them, Bayern, and Union Berlin, which means matchday 22 is going to be real fun because we actually have a top of the table clash between Bayern and Union Berlin. So I'll be back in about a few seconds to tell you what happens. Matchday 22, and once again we'll go in chronological order. Julian Brandt kicks us off with his 4th goal in his last 4 games, which is just enough to see Dortmund take the top spot. Around that same time, Leipzig get the better of Frankfurt, and because of a Freiburg draw the next morning, the Red Bull club goes into 4th. Finally, right at the end of this highly anticipated match day was the big one, saved for the very last. Bayern Munich versus Union Berlin, a top of the table clash. And it wasn't even close. So now that we're up to date after 22 matches, this is how the table looks so far. Bayern Munich and Borussia Dortmund are tied for the top of the league, both with 46 points. However, Bayern have a massive advantage with their goal difference. The Bavarians currently have the best attack and defense in the league. But you might be wondering, why does it feel like Bayern Munich are actually a little more vulnerable than usual? Throughout this campaign, Bayern has seen a lot of struggles, whether that be injuries, poor form, or even tactical changes. When it comes to the attack, Julian Nagelsmann throughout the season has had the tricky job of dealing with the loss of Lewandowski. He's changed the team shape and experimented with numerous strikers with differing successes. I think things have finally found a little more stability now that we have Choupo-Moting scoring goals. He scored 9 in total, with 4 of them coming this year. But before there was stability, Bayern's attack was heavily relying on a teenager in Jamal Musiala, who has broken out into a young superstar with 11 goals in 7 assists. And just by looking at those figures, yeah, you can definitely see the reliance there. And any kind of over-reliance on a single thing isn't really going to develop consistency, especially if it's a teenager. Then there's the defense, the best in the league, as we've said before. Benjamin Pavard and Alphonso Davies are having fantastic years, arguably the best fullbacks in the league. The problem though is that Bayern has conceded far too many goals that have costed them points. The partnership of Matthijs de Ligt and Dayot Upamecano has been pretty inconsistent, but the far bigger problem has been the instability at the goalkeeping position since Neuer's injury. The fire has been extinguished thanks to the signing of Jan Sommer, but he's not exactly performing at his best right now. The win against Union Berlin though could be a glimpse of a new awakening from this team, especially with winger Sadio Mane coming back from injury. He has 6 goals and 3 assists in just 12 starts. And of course, you can never count out a team that has Joshua Kimmich. He's currently one of Bayern's top performers this year. Right behind them is Borussia Dortmund. And since losing to the Vietnamese national team in November, Dortmund have not lost or even drawn a single match. They've in fact won every single one, which only means one thing. This is the Vietnam effect. I think it should be only fair that if Dortmund, just saying that now because, you know, they'll definitely bottle it somehow once we get to the last like 5 matches. But if Dortmund do win the Bundesliga title, I think some credit should be given to the Vietnamese national team. I mean, I wouldn't mind Park Hang-seo having an AFF championship and, you know, also the Bundesliga title. I mean, no one would mind that. Anyways though, BVB have easily the best form in the league currently, and all their players are reaching peak form at the perfect time. One of which is Jude Bellingham, the league's most valuable player. Stats do not do justice for Bellingham. He's a player you simply just have to watch. Elusive with his quick feet, reads the entire pitch like a children's book, can dictate the tempo, and does so well to find space to dribble or pass into. And remember, this dude is still 19. Another youngster doing well is center-back Nico Schlotterbeck. Dortmund last season conceded 52 goals, the 8th worst, and the same amount as 13th place Bochum. With the injection of Nico into the back line though, Dortmund have one of the best defenses in the league. Goalkeeper Gregor Kobel, who is the only reason BVB didn't concede 16 every game, is also having a great season. 8 clean sheets and is also, I would say, a top 3 keeper in the league. A lot of credit should be given to Edin Terzic for that, alongside his incredible tactical work in the attack. Despite losing Erling Haaland and also Sebastian Haller for half the season, he still made the attack work. The club top scorer is a major surprise. Julian Brandt, who has 8 goals and 4 assists, of course 4 of them coming this year. What we career mode players back in FIFA 16 imagined is finally coming to pass. And it's beautiful. Youssoufa Moukoko isn't too far off with 6 goals, and right behind him is super sub Gio Reyna with 5. And while Karim Adeyemi hasn't been exactly amazing in the Bundesliga this season, he's lightning in a bottle that can strike at pretty much any point. Behind these two, there's the story of the year, Urs Fischer's Union Berlin. The most hard-working team in the league with their near unstoppable defense, high-octane counterattacks, and precise build-up. Third place Union Berlin are a squad of outcasts backed by one of the best fan bases in Europe. Defender Robin Knoke is one of those veterans who has been essential to Berlin's defensive success. He lines up in Urs' famous back 3, which includes Danilo Doki, who is arguably the club's best performer. Then there's keeper Frederick Rono, who completes this formidable defense. He's a top 5 keeper in the league with a 74.4 save percentage, the best in the league. 28-year-old Yannick Haber has been playing a big role in midfield. Just ahead of him though in that tally is Union's best attacker, Geraldo Becker. 7 goals and 4 assists to his name, although he hasn't exactly been that great as of recent. And the same could be said about Jordan Pefok, who had a fiery start to the season. But thankfully, there's 32-year-old Kevin Behrens. He scored 4 goals, all coming this year. And this is what makes Union Berlin such an incredible story, because this was a player who 2 years ago was playing for SV Sandhausen in Zweite Bundesliga. Union Berlin have started out really well, but the mid-season form is really starting to falter. But it's only a matter of time till we see Urs Fischer respond to the doubters once again. Not too far off are Leipzig, who complete the top 4, currently on their way to the Champions League. After an underwhelming start, Marco's club, Rosa. Yeah. Since his tenure, Leipzig have only lost 4 times. They scored the joint second most goals in the league. Christopher Nkunku, of course, is the top scorer with 12 goals, which actually makes him joint second in the league top scorers. Who's the current top scorer? Niklas Füllkrug. Another player who's starting to explode on the scene is Dominik Szoboszlai in his sophomore season. He scored only 4 goals, but he's assisted 8. Speaking of Hungarian players, veteran defender Willi Orban is one of the best performing defenders in the league, and he plays alongside Josko Gvardiol. The Croatian defender is an incredible talent, but unfortunately for Leipzig, he will be leaving next season. Freiburg are just hanging in the title race with manager Christian Streich. Fun fact, Streich holds the second longest tenure in Europe's top leagues currently. He's been with the club since 2011, something completely unheard of in modern football, where you see managers come and go faster than Pete Davidson's girlfriends. And it's not like he's really evolved his tactics that much either. Freiburg still play football at hyper speeds. The reason behind Freiburg's recent success would be their better scouting and also their individual talent. For example, Nico Schlotterbeck from last season, who was sold to Dortmund this season. I mean, you usually don't see a defender from Freiburg be named the best defender in the league. Speaking of individual talent though, Vincenzo Grifo and Michael Gregoritsch are tearing apart the league. They've combined for 27 of Freiburg's 35 goals, and the defensive duo of Philipp Lienhardt and new signing Matthias Ginter has done well for the most part. The title race for Freiburg is more than likely over, as they've stumbled a few too many times. However, this team will want to redeem themselves after the disaster class ending last season and qualify for the Champions League. Finally, there's Frankfurt, who complete the top 6. Manager Oliver Glasner has put together a side that plays some exciting football, and there's no need to really add any fluff here, alright? Rando Kolumuani is a god amongst men. 10 goals and 10 assists, one of the best dribblers in the league. He'll be probably on his way out to a bigger club this summer, as is another player potentially. That player is attacking midfielder Daichi Kamada, who has 7 goals and 4 assists. Another player with 7 goals is the promising Jesper Lindström. Arsenal were actually linked with this guy for a bit. Also, you may not be aware, but Mario Götze has been pretty decent too. He averages the most key passes per game of any other player on the team. So that rounds up the Bundesliga review so far. This is the first time that we've seen this good of a title race in the German First Division. But contrary to what many people will say who just view the leagues through basically the table and that's it, the Bundesliga has been exciting. Despite the fact that Bayern have turned this league into their the Bundesliga is still very fun to watch as a neutral. If you love high octane energy and a game heavy in transition, you will love the Bundesliga, and I mean it. And I'll end off the video with this. If there was one song to associate with the Bundesliga, it'd probably be Blood Sugar by Pendulum. But of course, a massive shout out to all our patrons, including Janos Balash, Chris Damasceno, El Favi, Miliway009, Weston Ware, Aldipur, Alex Rod, Ulta, Amin Suamez, Aresan, Carlos Anaya, Daniel Ortiz, Francisco Hernandez, Juan Leras, Miguel Munoz, Wendy Mintang, Return Fire, Rory Burns, Saw, The Motor Drive, Tomicus, Trevor Batson, Vanilla Mexican 17, Victor, David Dunn, Declan Malloy, Dominic Griffin, Emmett Shea, Lewis, Joe Paricio, Jordan Clavitt, MX Weeb, Niche, Patrick Barley, and Unbroken Persona. If you'd like to join the Patreon, there'll be a link down below and up in the annotations. You can follow my Twitter if you want, follow my Instagram if you like, follow my TikTok, trying to get to 20,000 there, and of course you can follow my semi-active Twitch. But until then, I'll see you guys.